All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kabbalah Café. I want to begin by talking about our theme. So our theme is, who remembers the theme? I sent the theme last night. The theme was...
Reality check.
Hold on. Reality reversal. Reality reversal. It's easy to think that the directional arrow of energy flows top down. That everything here starts up there and it's only flowing one way. Kabbalah comes to teach us that things work the other way around also. That what we do, what we say, what we think, how we feel has an impact to literally change the heavens. And I was thinking, we could do this academically. We could look at the verses that allude to this and the Kabbalistic teachings that express this and understand this on an academic level. Or we can do this on a more experiential level, and you'll see what I mean in a second. And so I chose the latter, because to study academically, all right, theoretically, it's great. But what does it mean practically? So I want to show you what it looks like practically. I have here a copy of a letter. Pass these around. This was written by the Tzemach Tzedek. Now, the Tzemach Tzedek, Hilba, please take and pass. A few copies over there. The Tzemach Tzedek was the third Chabad Rebbe, the third leader of the Chabad Lubavitch movement. So just to explain, the Chabad movement was founded by Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, known as the Alter Rebbe. His son, the Mittler Rebbe, took over as the next Chabad Rebbe, and his son-in-law, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, took over from him. And, good morning, Sam. You got some breakfast? You saw it, right? Okay. And he became known as the Tzemach Tzedek, named after the book of halachic responsa that he wrote. Let me just explain what I just said. The Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, not only was a spiritual master and a rabbinic leader, he was also an incredible halachic expert, an expert in Jewish law. And he wrote books on halacha and Jewish law. Especially famous are his books of halachic responsa. What's halachic responsa? Shailot u'tshuvot. These are, and many rabbis did this over the centuries. I mean, we have them dating back almost 1,000 years, these style of books. Where rabbis got questions. Everything was obviously, you couldn't pick up the phone and call a rabbi. So if you wanted to communicate with a rabbi, either you showed up, or if you were not in town, you would write a letter. And so many rabbis, over many, many years and centuries, collected these questions and answers and put them in books. Why? Because it's instructive. It's instructive to see how Jewish law responds to interesting questions, curious questions, sometimes the most bizarre questions you can imagine, and how it responds to that using original sources. And so in these shuvot and these answers, you'll see. So first, it always begins. The rabbi will write a summary of the question that they received, and then they'll write their response. But the response is not just, and I said it was fine. That's not, you don't write a book on one-word answers. You write it based on, you show your work. Remember in math class, you had to show your work? This source implies this. That source implies that. And you go and you see how this rabbi takes, sometimes a dozen different sources, weaves, analyzes, and then says, based on all of the above, here's my conclusion. You don't understand, I mean, maybe you do, maybe you can appreciate just how incredible of wealth of wisdom that is. It's unbelievable. Just to give you a little bit of an insight, I recently encountered the following Shiloh to Shuvot. When the first Jewish community arrived in Brazil, this is going back maybe to, I don't know, this is a few hundred years ago, the first Jewish community in Brazil, which is in, I believe, the Southern Hemisphere, correct? Yeah. They wrote in 1600s. I thought it was the 1600s. Yes, so they wrote a letter. The community rabbi there, or leaders, wrote a letter back to, I don't know, Poland or somewhere in Europe, and we have a question. We have a question. Listen to this question. In the Jewish prayer liturgy, based on the time of year, based on the seasons, we switch between Mord Hatal, asking for dew, and Mashav Baruch Hu, asking for rain. And it's based on the winter and the summer seasons. And so they said, well, one second, we are now in the Southern Hemisphere. and the seasons are reversed. Should we reverse the prayers? Should we go the opposite? It's an unbelievable question. Now, you and I would be like, and I imagine some of you in the room are like, that's a really good question. What is the answer? This comes up in the 1600s. They write a letter to this rabbi, and the rabbi writes a letter back, and he publishes it in his book. But he wasn't the only one to answer the question. There were other rabbis that also answered the question. So you can look through these responses and see how different rabbis assess this question, because the community in Australia also asked the question. You had so many different communities that asked the same question, and sometimes you have different answers. It's fascinating. I'm not going to give you the answer because that would take a full hour to go through that process and all the sources and all the implications and the Gemara and Talmudic statements that imply this, that, or the other. It's an unbelievable exploration when you dig into these things. All to say, this is where the Tzemach Tzedek got his name from. That wasn't his name. His name wasn't Tzemach, nor was it Tzedek. His name was Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, or I'm sure he wasn't called of Lubavitch. Rabbi Menachem Mendel, that was his name. But he became known as the Tzemach Tzedek. And that was the title to his book of halachic responses that he wrote in the 1800s. Now, all of that is a quick introduction to the letter. The letter that we're going to study, this letter is about fear and anxiety. So the background of the letter is that the Tzemach Tzedek's mechutin. Let me explain what a mechutin is. For those that, right? Mechutin is when your kid marries someone that their spouse's parents to you are your mechutin. I don't know if there's an English word for that. Not really. No, it's your kid's in-laws, right? It's your child, right? So let's say you have a daughter, marries, right? So her husband's parents.
Extended family?
Yeah, but like mechutin is like the respective parents of the kids that got married. So their relation with each other, they're called mechutin. Fine. Mechutanim, plural, right? Mechutanim. Mechutanim, parents, and whatever it is. Okay. So his mechutin is plural, mechutin is singular. His mechutin, the father of his son's wife. Let's just read this. All right. We're just going to read this. It's your child's in-laws. Yes, it is definitely your child's in-laws. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pull this up. 1 second. Let me find something here. Oh, wow. Chinese.
Doesn't have Hebrew. All the
That's
languages
cool.
but Hebrew.
Except Hebrew. Interesting. I'm sure it's innocent. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up this text. It's really powerful. Oh my gosh. We're going to go through this letter. Okay, fight your illness by fighting your fears, a letter from the Tzemach Tzedek. I'm going to read the intro. It's in the italics. Rabbi Shlomo Freidis' daughter. So that was a guy's name, Rabbi Shlomo Freidis, or Reb Shlomo Freidis. He was married. So his daughter was married to the son of the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, known as the Tzemach Tzedek. Rabbi Freidis had fallen ill and was consumed with worry over his health. So again, the mechutin of the Tzemach Tzedek. So Tzemach Tzedek's son's wife's father got sick. He was sick, and he was consumed with worry about his health. It seems likely that this letter followed a response by Freidis to the letter posted here, in which the Tzemach Tzedek wrote that worry itself was hurting his health. Freidis, it seems, responded that he's praying to God to take away his fear and worry. But Tzemach Tzedek is not at all satisfied with his response and makes the point that overcoming one's fear is something that God gives man to achieve. God gives man to achieve. I don't even know what that sentence makes sense. It's basically, it's up to you. It's not up to God.
It's not up to God.
So God doesn't take away your worry. You have to take away your own worry. Okay. But I actually want to read the other letter, which you don't have, but I have a hyperlink. So with that in mind, I'm going to read the first letter. The first letter is very quick. I'm just going to read it. Okay. So this is from Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, a third Rebbe of Lubavitch, Tzedek, to his in-law. Oh, his in-law. That's what they call it. All right. Mechutin. Rabbi Shlomo Freidis around the year 1829. So this letter goes back to 1829. Rabbi Freidis was suffering from an illness to which he eventually succumbed. I understand from this letter of yours how deeply at times you ponder your lack of good health, and that pains me very much. If you would listen to my advice, you would distance yourself from this behavior to the utmost degree and remove your mind from it entirely. Just trust in God that he will issue his decree and you will be certainly healed. By ruminating over this so deeply, you are directly damaging yourself, both physically, as we know from actual experience, as well as spiritually. I just want to pause here for a moment. How well known was the fact that a patient who is not positive has a worse outcome? I mean, how well was that known in 1829? I don't know. But I know all the way in the year 2024, I think medicine is still getting on board with that concept that we're trying to put people in more positive spaces, less ominous rooms, less ominous hallways, etc., to facilitate the healing process. The Rebbe famously said, "Why are we calling it in Hebrew Beit Cholim, a hospital? Beit Cholim, a house of the sick. Call it Beit Refuah, a house of healing. Focus on the positive, not the negative. Here's where all the sick people are, as opposed to here's where the magic of healing happens." That's a way more positive outlook.
Think good and it will be good.
Yeah. Let's continue inside.
The research that you're referring to that comes now, how it eventually revolutionary. Every research that comes is like, oh my God, this is a new revelation.
Yeah.
If you're positive, you're going to heal.
Yeah.
So then somebody that's negative.
Right. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that positivity, that the mental state of the patient and the emotional state of the patient can help the physical state of the patient? Who would have thought? Well, in 1829, the Rebbe, the third Rebbe says, as we know from actual experience, it's obvious, right? By ruminating, again, I'm just read that sentence. By ruminating over this so deeply, you are directly damaging yourself, both physically, as we know from actual experience. You don't need research. It's obvious if you're in a bad mental state, if you're despondent, it's not going to help. As well as spiritually, it's not good spiritually. But trust in God removes all heavenly accusations and judgments against you, as is written in Reshis Chachma, Portal of Love, chapter 12, in the verse, anyone who trusts in God, kindness encompasses him. He explains there in Reshis Chachma that that this kindness encompasses a person and shields him from any judgments against him, saving him from all afflictions of this world. This kindness is the kindness of the one who is transcendent of time. It is called great kindness, for it shines without limit or measure, meaning even if a person is not at all fit to receive it. The whole idea of trust in God lies in this great kindness, because it is from there that ongoing, constant divine care derives. The verse says, "For his wrath is but for a moment, while his goodwill is for life." All the wrath and judgments are incidental momentarily and momentary, while divine kindness is the flow of life that follows, and a great surge of goodwill, as explained in the Eitz Chaim. This is especially so according to that which my grandfather, master and teacher, explained. That's the Alter Rebbe, the writer, the author of Tanya, explained in Igeret HaKodesh, that when we give charity in amounts greater than a fifth or a tenth of our profits, we create receptors for this unlimited kindness to be displayed openly in our world. If so, again, the Alter Rebbe writes, interestingly, that when it comes to physical health, no one would ever say, well, I live on a budget. Sorry, I have a budget. It's not in my budget. You need physical health. You pay whatever amount it is. The same thing needs to be also for our spiritual health, right? That when halacha says you give a tenth or you give a fifth even, but don't give more than that. Don't give more than a fifth. That's only a normative situation. But when you need a blessing, just like you need a doctor, you're going to splurge. It doesn't matter. Like you're not putting a cap on it. So too, if you need a blessing, you don't put a cap on it. So that creates receptors for this unlimited kindness to be displayed openly in our world. If so, in our generation, and with the current restraints of our times, when certainly everyone gives more than a fifth of their profit, we are undoubtedly awakening a display of divine kindness to shine without limits or measure. And certainly it will remove all judgments and accusations against us. Because with kindness of this sort, there are no obstacles or obstructions. Because with kindness of this sort, there are no obstacles or obstructions. As it passes through the supernal chambers, flowing from above to below, from chamber to chamber, it doesn't stop in any chamber to determine whether this person toward whom it is directed is deserving or not. It simply passes through with a mighty gush of force until it arrives mamish, literally, tangibly, in this material world. It is like a mighty river with an unstoppable current, so powerful that no one can harness it for a watermill. Okay. And so I heard from my grandfather, my holy master and teacher, concerning the priestly blessing. He explained that the Kohanim, with this blessing, awaken this divine kindness so that it arrives rapidly in the physical realm. As our sages explained, he will bless you means he will bless you financially. In other words, in very physical terms, mamish, with children, health, and income. That's the initial blessing. So he basically blesses his mechutin, his in-law, for good health, and he says that it's going to be good. In response to that letter, apparently, Rabbi Shlomo Freitas responds to the Tzemach Tzedek, and he says, please give me a blessing that God should take away my fear and worry. And to that is the second letter. And this is the letter that you have in front of you. Let's read this inside. Honestly, it's a letter worth studying, and I would say worth posting excerpts of it. Like, it's literally bulletin. I don't know if the right word is bulletin board material. That sounds like a sports locker room, but it's almost like by your mirror, like type of stuff, like a mantra to remind yourself of. It's in your hands. So the Tzemach Tzedek begins by writing the following. Yes, it's true that we have to ask God for joy. As the psalm goes, rejoice the soul of your servant, which is King David saying, make the soul of your servant rejoice. In other words, God, give me joy. So yes, it's appropriate to ask God for joy, for simcha. Similarly, in our prayers, we say, remove grief and moaning from amongst us. As we ask God to remove the tsaras, to remove the difficulties. So yes, there is a place to pray to God and to ask God to bring us joy and to remove the pain, to remove the displeasure, the things that are not joyous. Nevertheless,
Is he asking to get rid of the things that are problems?
No.
Or for you, internally, for you to deal with it better?
who's asking? Freitas?
Is the,
Is it Tillim? In Tillim, are you saying?
yeah, what's he saying? He's saying, what's he asking for? That God should get rid of the problem or get rid of the way I'm reacting to the
Yeah, it's a
problem?
good question. There's a good question. I think he's reading it to remove the reaction to the problem. So there is a place, he says, to ask God to help us get out of that psychological and emotional state. Right, to help us deal with it better, to bring us more joy and positivity. Imagine someone who recognizes within themselves that they're being pessimistic, and like, please, God, help me look at the world a little bit more optimistically. They're asking for that, right? Give me joy, remove my grief, my pain, the moaning. Not the pain itself, but the response. Nevertheless, look what he says. So on the one hand, Rabbi Freitas, my mechutin, your request is validated. On the other hand, nevertheless, there's also the panic that a person brings upon himself, above and beyond, essentially. And every person has the choice and the control to prevent himself from doing so. That's a powerful line. Let's continue. There is a clear proof of this. The Torah prohibits a person from panic and fear at a time of war. When an army went out to battle to defend the nation, the Kohen would stand before them and say, Hear, O Israel, you are about to go to battle with your enemy. Don't let your hearts be frail. Do not fear, nor panic, nor be in dread of them. So we have the Kohen that was associated. There was a Kohen that was associated with the soldiers. The Kohen would speak to the soldiers before they went out to battle, and he would say, You're about to go into battle. Don't be afraid. Okay. What does that mean? If only we're so easy. Don't be afraid. Perfect. What does that mean? Both Maimonides and the Sefer Mitzvot Gedolot, those are two great Rishonim, two great rabbis that enumerate the 613 mitzvot. The Torah, as you probably know, when you open up the Torah scroll, there's no number in the column that says, oh, by the way, we're up to 234 in case anyone's counting. There's no running list. So you have to figure, and the Torah says way more than 613 things. It's thousands of specific things. So you have to have rules of what's counted as a mitzvah and what's considered not a mitzvah, or what's considered to be a subcategory of the mitzvah, but not its own mitzvah. And so Rambam Maimonides writes a list. The Smag, Sefer Mitzvot Gedolot, writes a list. You have different rabbis wrote different lists, and there's a lot of them, most of it is the same, but there are some differences. So he says in this letter, both Rambam and the Smag count this as one of the 613 commandments of the Torah. What's the commandment? That the Kohen, that the priest associated with the army priest, would go and tell the soldiers, don't be afraid. Oded, does this still happen in Israel? Okay. All right. This
All the commandments for the soldiers.
Kohen. Kohen, to communicate. In other words, that's one of the 613 mitzvot. It's not just correct. Yeah, but there are many mitzvahs that, yeah, women can't do men mitzvahs, men can't do women mitzvahs. A Kohen can't do a non, well, is there any mitzvah that's only for a non-Kohen? Yes, for sure. Pidyon haben. If you're a Kohen, you can't do that mitzvah of redemption. Today, whatever. Today, it's might be a good practice, but a mitzvah is a mitzvah. And I don't think that the mitzvah. Why not pidyon haben? Because if you're a Kohen, you don't do a pidyon haben. Only if the child is born to an Israelite. In fact, when the person makes a declaration of pidyon haben, which I actually did with my oldest son, you actually say, "My Israelite wife bore this child." Like you actually make a declaration that there's no Kohen involved, kind of like a disclaimer. No Kohen, or even Levi, even a Bas Levi. Either he or she is a Levi or a Kohen, you're out. Anyway, the point is like this. It's a mitzvah. What's the mitzvah? Your question is a mitzvah. Is the mitzvah not to be afraid? Or is the mitzvah for the Kohen to announce, don't be afraid? The answer is the mitzvah is for the Kohen to announce, don't be afraid. But the point of that is that it's a mitzvah to say, don't be afraid, which means that on some level, saying, don't be afraid is a thing that might have an effect. And then he asks the question, next paragraph, this appears quite astonishing. What should a person then do if nevertheless his heart leaps and he panics when he sees the blood of battle? So what do? The Kohen tells you, announcement, because he blows a shofar, a trumpet. He says, don't be afraid. You want to tell my heart? Like, I hear you, but what do I do? What do I do about this? That's thumping in my chest. Now what? Let's continue. The Torah, after all, can only command you to do something that's within your volition to choose to do or not to do. As Maimonides writes in his 8 chapters. His 8 chapter, Shmona Prakim, is Rambam's introduction to Pirkei Avot, which is a classic work, which I'm thinking now we should definitely study. We should have a course on this, Shmona Prakim. It's so famous. I mean, when I say famous, it's so like important. Okay, all right, add that to the list. It's not a long list, by the way, because we eventually do roll things out. I think pretty much we're good with that. But okay, it's on my short list. By the way, speaking of my short list, it's been on my short list to start a Tanya share, which we are starting in January. And who's going to be teaching it? None other than the rabbi who translated this. Rabbi Tzvi Freeman will be teaching a Tanya share beginning in January. Not to be missed. He is incredible. He's actually authoring right now a brand new translation of Tanya. It's coming out in serialized version every week. So he's going to be teaching from that new translation of Tanya, new insights. We're calling it Demystifying Tanya. Look for the information to come out hopefully this week. The 19th of Kislev is Friday. So look for an email Thursday, Friday. Yeah. Okay. Yes. We'll keep it. Yeah. Okay. So the question he asks is, one second, there's a mitzvah for the Kohen to tell the soldiers not to be afraid. And it's an actual mitzvah to do that. Well, what happens if I'm afraid? Well, then what do? The Torah only can command us to do something actionable. How do you legislate an emotion? How do you say, you can't be afraid? Don't be afraid. I am. But this is how it works. You know, I'm going to call this life-changing, but obviously, like anything in life, it's only to the extent that we integrate it. What I'm saying is that if you and I, if everyone here, if everyone listening to this integrates this, your life will change. It is a guarantee. But this is how it works. Every person's soul is clothed within 3 external layers: thought, speech, and action. This is where the person's conduct takes place. And it is in these 3 layers, and we know them as the levushim, right? The garments of the soul. We've talked about this before. It's in these 3 layers that a person can exercise his free will. Every person can consciously choose what to think about, speak about, or do, which means like this. You and I don't have full control over our subconscious. You and I don't have full control over what thoughts pop into our mind, or what feelings, what emotions we feel in the deep recess of our heart. That we don't have control over. That's going on in the background. But what we do have control over is what we choose to think about in any given moment, choose to speak to or verbalize in any given moment, or actually do in any given moment, which means, back inside, that even if you are terrified in your heart, you can remove your thought, speech, and action from that fear. The main thing is to not think about it or speak about it at all, but rather about the opposite. Like I said earlier, this is what it says in Likutei Amarim Tanya, chapter 14. And if you're wondering where did he say this earlier, he said this in the previous letter that I read a few moments ago, which I know you don't have the copy in front of you, but I read it, and he said over there, it's about the focusing on the opposite. Take a look at what he writes over here. The mechanics of conquering fear. So this is what it means when we are commanded, do not let your hearts weaken, etc. When the Kohen speaks to the soldiers, don't think about things that will cause fear. The Kohen, the army Kohen is not saying don't be afraid. He does say that, but that's not what he means. He means don't think about the things that are going to cause you to panic. And that's precisely what Maimonides writes as halacha. Anyone who brings himself to panic and terror by thinking such thoughts transgresses a prohibition. Because the issue is not how the heart feels. The issue is what we're thinking about, and that we have full control over. If a person says, I have no control over my anxiety, I have no control over my fear. So he's saying, 1 second, do you have control over what you're thinking about in this moment? And the answer is yes, you do have control. And that's where the mitzvah lies. The mitzvah lies not in changing how you feel, but changing what you are thinking about in this moment. Are you thinking about the thing that's making you afraid, or are you going to switch it to think about something else? And let's read this practically, as soon as a person stops pondering these things, in other words, the things that are evoking the fear and the panic, instantly the feeling of dread disappears. At the very least, the fear immediately fades with no physical manifestation, as though it were sleeping. So whether it's been completely, what's the word? Excised? Is that a word? Is that even a word? Cut out, yeah, excised. Whether it's completely cut out or whether it's put into the old slumber mode, either way, it's tranquilized. Either way, it's not active. Then within a few days, it will be completely gone, to the point that it won't fall into the mind even as an involuntary thought. That's what the Torah is telling you when it says, don't allow your hearts to weaken. So he just dropped like a bomb. He just dropped the most, first of all, you could call this like, I'm going to call it radical, the most radical idea. Radical idea is that you can control your fear, anxiety, and panic in your heart by stopping to think about what you're thinking about. In other words, if you're feeling these emotions, it's only because you're thinking those thoughts. If you stop thinking those thoughts, you're not going to feel those emotions. That's his.
So, Rabbi, what
and
do
it's
you
all
replace
based on-
those thoughts with?
You're not gonna let the emotion control you.
Right, but it's all based on the Kabbalistic idea, which we've explained many times, and I quote this, but like that the mind controls the heart by nature, which is one of the classic refrains in the book of Tanya. This idea that literally, the mind controls the heart. There's a direct, not just correlation, but causation between mind and heart. What you're thinking about will always impact and really shape your emotions. So if you're feeling something, all you need to do is not all you need to do, I'm not trying to minimize it, but if you're feeling something, recognize that is the product of whatever is flowing through your mind consciously at this point in time, which means that if I become aware of my emotions and I become aware of the fact that I do not wish to feel these emotions, then I can hopefully rein in my thoughts and stop thinking about what it is that was causing these emotions.
So what thoughts can you replace that thought with?
Okay, so take a look he continues to explain. He addresses this in the next, you'll see, he literally addresses this in the next few paragraphs. That's what the Torah is telling you. Oh, we already read. Don't allow your hearts to weaken. Again, I just want to explain that. What he's saying. When the Torah says, when the Kohen says, don't allow your hearts to weaken, what it really means is we're not addressing the heart. We're saying, don't allow your hearts to weaken. In other words, don't allow your mind to have free, range to run rampant with the thoughts that will cause your hearts to weaken. When the Kohen says, don't allow your hearts to weaken, he's not speaking to the heart, he's speaking to the mind. Don't allow the heart, meaning get in control of your thoughts so that your hearts will not weaken. Yeah.
Okay, one is essential, that you're using your mind in this process. Okay, now you get to battle and your fears that you have, are in front of you and there. So how do you undo that? 'Cause
So
once
you're
you
asking,
battle,
you're good. You're asking, there's one thing about the fear of anticipation. Then there's one thing about the fear of actually being there. We'll see how he explains it, because we're still right in the middle of this. Let's at least play this out. I would, though, say anecdotally, oftentimes the fear of anticipation is way worse than the actual fear or the discomfort of dealing with the situation. Typically, the anxiety is not when you're, I can't say typically. All right, sometimes at least. All right, let's go back inside. Let's just see how this plays out. How does it work? Right? After he just this radical take, how does it work? Why does fear disappear when thought is no longer engaged? This is because all emotional responses, this is powerful. All emotional responses are sustained by the awareness of the mind, which is the mental faculty called da'at. The Zohar calls da'at awareness, the key, the maftech, the key to 6 doors, meaning that, which refers to the 6 emotions, meaning that it can activate all 6 emotions. But this awareness only engages the emotions through active mental articulation, which serves as the intermediary between mind and emotion. In other words, yes, da'at is the maftech, the kol shis, da'at, right? That, the lowest of the intellectual faculties, is the key that unlocks the 6 emotions. Sure, but that only does that when it is active in thought. Once you stop, back inside, once you stop articulating these troubling thoughts in your mind, the mind is disengaged from the emotion. The emotion is no longer awake, and is as though it never was. In other words, you're sucking out the energy or the oxygen from the emotion by turning off the signals from the mind. If you turn off the mental signals from the mind that are fueling that emotion, the emotion is no longer fueled. You're cutting off the oxygen. That flame, if you've ever had a candle and you put a glass cup over it safely, etc., right? You'll see that the flame slowly shrinks and then it's out. That's what he's saying over here. An even greater concept is stated in the Talmud, that even natural human lust cannot be aroused without one consensually engaging his thought, and one is then culpable for his sinful desire, as Maimonides rules. We can get into that a little bit. Basically, the point is that, all right, I don't know how that squares with the modern thinking on it. Basically, it says with a man that the physiological response is driven by the mind. So if the mind, which means that there's some willful, it's hard to claim that I didn't want to if there is a physiological response, right? Yes? Okay. Speak B'lashon Nakiya. This is also, back inside, this is also the implication of the Talmud in Brachot 60a, that it is up to a person to fear or not to fear, meaning it's all in the mind. It's all in the mind. But the main way to remove your mind from any troubling subject, but the main way, this is the actual practical advice. How do we do it? How do we do it? And I'm not sure why the translation was, but the main way. Like when you say but, you're trying to sounds like you're trying to negate something that we said before. This should be in sparkling neon sign. Here's how to do it. Here's how to do it. Here's how to do it.
Well,
The
this
main
is
way.
Right before, he says it's up to a person to fear or not to fear.
Right.
Well, that's not
It's not
so
easy.
simple. So
Right.
he's saying the
The
main
main
way.
way, right? But it's not. I don't know if it's a
It's not
but.
the only
It's,
way,
it's
but
all
it's-
right. But the main way to remove your mind from any troubling subject is by keeping it engaged in other matters. That's the key. You're not going to be able to turn off your brain or turn off your thoughts. But what you can do is fix your mind on something pleasant. Look what he says. These could be even worldly matters that are necessities and bring happiness. Think about dinner with your friends. Think about time with your family. Think about the ski trip to Colorado. Whatever you want to, something pleasant, something that is positive. Here you have a Hasidic Rebbe saying, I'm not telling you, you have to be memorizing lines of Tanya and repeating them in your mind as a mantra to get over your anxiety, your fear, and your panic. No, you can think about other things. I mean, I'm assuming what he's saying by worldly matters that are necessities and bring happiness. The word necessities is a little bit open for a thing. I'm assuming he means basically that's not good. Okay. Think about things that are, thank God we have a case on this. Oh, thank you. Look at that. Things that are, I think you're safe. Okay. Things that are kosher, right? Things that are kosher, things that are not untoward, right? Don't be distracting yourself with something that is that's not so kosher. The idea here would be to thank you, to focus on things that are at their very core neutral. They don't have to be holy. They could be neutral as long as they're positive. Let's continue. Odette, thank you. Oh, yeah. See, there's multiple napkins. That's it. That's it. No. And certainly back inside, and certainly in thoughts of Torah, for they rejoice the heart. So you could think about neutral, positive things, neutral, happy things, or Torah things, certainly Torah things. Each day, something particular for that day with a fixed schedule for studying Torah, especially if you can do this with a partner. There's some M dashes there, but if I were to kind of summarize, I would say like this. You're trying to get your head into a happier space. That's what he's saying. If your heart's if there's a lot of fear, anxiety, and panic going on in your heart, he says it's always coming from one place, the mind. Even if you're not aware, there's a phrase which I've shared many times that psychologists use. The phrase is being metacognitive. Metacognitive means that you're aware of what you're thinking, because we're always thinking something. There's always like thoughts that are running through our head, but we're not always aware of what we're thinking. We're just thinking what we're thinking. We're not always like stepping out and saying, oh, we're not always observing our thoughts. We're thinking our thoughts. It's like, those kids games at the arcade, you can drive a car. So you can have like different views. One view is that you're actually driving the car. You're seeing the road. The other one is you're like a helicopter or drone and you're watching your car and you're steering your car, watching your car. So there's thinking and then there's observing yourself thinking. That's being metacognitive. And he's suggesting, without actually saying it, to be a little metacognitive. Like, okay, what am I thinking about? Because if I'm feeling
cognitive, emotions control it.
right, well, your mind is still controlling it, but you're not
Right.
aware. You're not holding onto the
Emotions.
steering wheel. Correct. You're not steering anymore. So give me half a second. So therefore, it's important to be say 1 second. I'm feeling. I don't like the way I'm feeling. I don't like the way I'm feeling. I want to feel differently. Okay, so what do I need to do? So let me become more aware of what I'm thinking about, because there's a direct line. It's not a direct line. It's literally a steering wheel line between what I'm thinking about and how I'm feeling. So let me pay attention to what I'm thinking about, and then let me choose to turn that wheel to some other direction. Turn it where? To something that brings happiness, right? Coca-Cola, I'm kidding. Think about something that brings happiness, whatever it is. Let alone, how much better, even if it's ideas of Torah. Study some Torah every day. He's not saying distract yourself with Torah. He never said those words. Distract yourself with Torah or distract yourself with happy thoughts. Think about things that bring you happiness. Study Torah, study with someone, and you'll find yourself giving less oxygen to the things that make you afraid. Sure, absolutely.
Takes art, takes you out of mindfulness.
Yes.
Brings you to feelings of-
Art, you said music, right? You said music, art, yard work, volunteering, so many activities that we do switch our brain into a different mode because now we're thinking about what we're doing and we're thinking about that instead of thinking about the other stuff that's causing the anxiety. So it's so important. And I know that modern psychology, or I don't know if it's the most modern, but psychology would say, no, it's not good to distract yourself. You have to feel the feelings. You know what? There's a time and place for everything. There's a time to work things through. There's time to work things through in a method. But then there's, 2 p.m. in the middle of the day when suddenly you feel like, when you don't feel good and you're like, well, what do I do now? And it's like, okay, are you ready to start processing everything? Or can you just turn the steering wheel and get into a better headspace? Yeah.
Following that, I remember one of another Italian that he actually said, don't dismiss the feelings completely. But what you said exactly is like, I don't want to now feel that.
Correct.
So I'm going to actually set the time in my brain and say, I'm going to be with this fear. Like on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, I'm going to sit and process why do I have this fear. So actually even modern psychology will say that's okay because you're not pushing away and not
Correct.
ever.
Not
You will
denying
get
it.
to the time that you
Correct.
have to deal with that.
You're not denying it.
You're not
You're
denying.
not denying it. Right. Denying it is to pretend like it doesn't exist. He's not saying deny it. He's saying, I will, he doesn't say it here, but he's basing this off the Alter Rebbe. Anyway, the whole thing he says, my grandfather said, right? So it's all based on Tanya. Exactly. And Tanya says, tell yourself it's a valid thing to be concerned about. It's a valid thing to deal with. I'll deal with this later. And there could be so many different categories of things that are causing our anxiety, things that we've done in the past that we feel bad about, things that are coming up in the future, things that someone else may or may not do. Could be internal stuff, external stuff, global, political, geopolitical stuff. Could be anything any number of things that's causing us to have fear in our heart. Could be a war. I'm talking about war here. Literally, the context is war. I mean, I think we can all relate on some level, right? War causing anxiety, not just for the soldiers, but for all of us who care about what we care about. So how do you deal with it? He's not saying deny the feelings. That's a good way to say. He's not saying deny, right? Push it off. You're going to deal with it when you deal with it. Deal with it with if you need, someone to talk to, whatever it is, you'll find time to do that. If you need to work through it yourself, you'll find time to do with it. But right now, let me get into a better space. Right now, I have the power to get into a better space by changing my thoughts. It's powerful. Oh, look at this in the parentheses. Speaking of areas of Torah to study, it could be in the revealed parts of Torah. For example, in Orach Chaim, the laws of the morning blessings and reading the Shema and prayer and such. And in the inner Torah, in the hand copy teachings that we have. That's, wow. Before Chassidus was really published. So they had little handwritten booklets. That's what he's saying. What's the letter from 1829? It's a long time ago. I think the other letter said 1829 or so. Okay. Fake it until you make it. Another thing. Don't speak up. Don't speak. He just talked about thinking. Change your thoughts. Change your life. Don't speak of any depressing matters, heaven forbid. On the contrary, always act joyfully as though you are filled with joy in your heart, even though it's not there in your heart at the time. Eventually it will be. Again, the title of that one is Fake It Until You Make It, right? Put on the music and dance. Or the examples I gave, do some gardening, do some cooking, right? Do the things that are done when you're you don't want to drag yourself out of bed, okay? But you're going to do it anyway. And because of that, your heart will follow. There's reasoning behind this. He continues in the letter, when you make it a consistent habit to behave in a certain way, you eventually integrate that into your personality. Cognitive behavioral therapy. There you go. 1829. And who says that not everything comes from Torah? Literally, it's all here. Maimonides writes this at the end of chapter 1 of Hilchot Deot, and how may a man acquire these attitudes so that they are permanent with him? He should do once, repeat, and do again the things he is called upon to do in harmony with the attitudes. Wow, this translation is a little bit awkward, and repeat the practice continuously until the doing it, okay, will be accomplished with slight effort, and they will not be burdensome upon him. Then these attitudes will be a fixed part of his personality. Okay, sounds like instructions from a foreign product, but what he's saying is that if you do something, if you just almost force yourself to just do things that are, in a positive things, you will eventually come into that space of it will become habit. Maimonides famously writes, when it comes to tzedakah, that there's a value in giving tzedakah consistently every single day, as opposed to giving, let's say, once a year and a lot. Why? He says, not to the exclusion, you do both, but like the reason he says is because if we give every day, we habituate ourselves to acts of kindness, to chesed. We become kinder people when kindness is practiced consistently. Again, that's consistent with what he's saying over here. When you do something consistently, so it just becomes who you are. It just changes your dynamic. Your face may just become like a kinder face because you're doing something kind continuously back inside. He writes similarly in the 4th chapter of his 8 chapters. Right, similarly, the quote above, however, is within the context of healing the illness of the soul. In Sefer HaChinuch, Mitzvah 16, that's written by a different author, Aaron Halevi Barcelona, you will find the same idea, and so too in many other places in their works. In other words, the early, these are Rishonim, right? These are early philosophers and Jewish philosophers, lived in the 1000s, 1100s, 1200s, right? 1,000 years ago, they're writing about this idea about how to heal the things that the emotional pain that we have, or the emotional discomfort that we have, and how not only by thinking differently do we feel differently, but by acting differently, that can actually move our heart into a different place. Although none of their works require support or proof, nevertheless, there is proof according to the Kabbalah as well. In Pardes Rimonim, portal of colors. Wow, who would have thought? There was a Kabbalistic book called the Portal of Colors. I think we're all interested in that one right now. What are the Kabbalistic color palettes? Chapter 1, where he writes that a person should choose the colors of his clothes according to the disposition he wishes to channel from above. Are you kidding me? That is gold. Let's add that to the list, right? This is going to be a little Kabbalah shopping. This is great. Color-coded clothing according to Kabbalah. That's so much alliteration. He cites support. Gold. Or what do I want to feel today? And he's talking about kickstarting it from the outside in. He cites support for this from the Zohar as well, that teaches that everything depends on the way you behave, again, from the outside in or from the bottom up. All this leads to one point. In other words, all of this, we're just circling around different parallel ideas, all for one point. Back to the point of this letter. You need to control your thought, speech, and action so as not to mull over worrisome matters that weaken the heart. And so that on the contrary, you speak and act as a happy person. Then these dispositions will become an integral part of your personality. And once they are, so too God will pour his spirit upon you from above with joy and a good heart. And look at that last line. It's like he dropped a bomb, a good bomb, right there in that last line. He says, all of these are ways you can use. He has, if I had to summarize this, he says very simply, you want to neutralize fear, worry, and anxiety from your heart? Here's how to do it. Your mind, your thought, speech, and action, that's in your control? Yes. You can't control your feelings right now? Okay. But you can control your thought, speech, and action? Great. Switch your thoughts to other thoughts, to happy thoughts, Torah thoughts, something happy, something positive, something not that. That's almost the qualification for this is it's not that other thought that's making you panic. So not that thought, some other thought. Words, speech, don't speak about it. Action, do something else. Do something positive. Do something else. And all of that will shift the mood, shift your heart into a better place. And then he says, I'm going to read that last line again. Then these dispositions will become an integral part of your personality. And once they are, he says, not only will you have shifted your own space, but so too God will pour his spirit upon you from above with joy and a good heart. God will give you more things to be happy about. That leads us to the next statement. Never a sad song. So I heard from my grandfather, teacher and master, may his memory be for a blessing. That, of course, is the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad and the author of the Tanya. When we were in Vienna on the night of his passing, famously, the Alter Rebbe passed away in 1812, fleeing from Napoleon's army. He supported the Russians in the French-Russian War, and the French army was sent by Napoleon to find, capture the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe said before he left his house to burn down his house because Napoleon was going to try to take something from the Alter Rebbe's possession. He said, burn everything down. And they were traveling and they were running and they came to a fork in the road and they asked the Alter Rebbe where to go. He was in the back of the carriage. He said to go one direction. They made the wrong turn. They told him they made the wrong turn. And he said, it's the end. He knew it was over. The moment they made the wrong turn, he knew it was over. And eventually he wasn't well. He was traveling on the road, running. He got sick. He was sheltered. The French army never got to him, but he passed away from ill health very shortly thereafter. Anyway, I mean, it was the winter, right? When Napoleon entered Russia, it was the winter of 1812, which is why France did not win that war. They lost. But if you were an older rabbi on the run, you can imagine you were not going to hotels with full heat going on, and that was and you probably didn't have a lot of food either. Okay, so when we were in Vienna on the night of his passing, this is the night that the Alter Rebbe passed away. The Alter Rebbe was born in 1745 and passed away in 1812. The night of his passing, he passed away on Chav Daled Tevet, the 24th day of Tevet. Okay, so it's a month after Hanukkah or so. So I began to pray the evening prayer with a sad melody. Imagine his grandson. He sees his grandfather is sick. The Rebbe is sick. And his grandfather, the Rebbe, is sick and is dying. And he began to pray Ma'ariv, the evening service, with a sad melody, sad tune. But he stopped me from doing so. He said, stop, don't do that. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know exactly what he said, but he told him to stop. After I finished my prayer, he told me, so I heard from my teacher and master, the Maggid of Mizrich, on the verse, listen to this verse, as the appearance of a man upon it from above. It's only going to work in the Hebrew. This is from, I believe, from the vision of Ezekiel's chariot, Ezekiel's vision of the divine chariot, as the appearance of a man upon it from above. What does that mean? And it means like this, according to the attitude a person displays below, so he is shown from above. If you're in a joyous mood, joyous energy comes upon you from above. If you're in a negative mood, negative energy comes from above. I'm going to repeat that line. According to the attitude a person displays below, so he is shown from above. Heaven is a mirror of earth. The appropriate thing for a person of your stature. So now we're back to the letter. The Tzemach Tzedek is writing to his Mechutin. The appropriate thing for a person of your stature is to wean yourself from all sadness. If a person can remove dread from his heart, even in a situation in which there is something to dread, as I pointed out, although more so in your case, that thank heaven, you have nothing to fear whatsoever, neither in terms of your body's health, nor in matters of income. After all, there was a thread of divine kindness extended over you this past summer. And there's a well-known statement of our sages, anyone who is favored, not so quickly, etc. Basically, anyone who's favored, not so quickly will the favor cease. Really, all this is just the seduction of human urges. In other words, the Yetzer. You need to cast it aside like any unsolicited thought as evil, mamish, literal evil. It's written, don't stray after your heart, etc. That means to turn your mind away from negative thoughts that are related to sins, as Maimonides writes. In precisely the same way, you need to distance yourself from these pessimistic thoughts. Just like you have to remove your thoughts from from anything related to sin, you also have to remove your thoughts from anything pessimistic. He says it's a mitzvah. If nevertheless you wish to fulfill the mitzvah of worrying, wow,
keep the psychology in business.
then give it its proper place. As the saying of the sages goes, secrets of Torah are shared only with one whose heart worries within him. In other words, if you want to have a little anxiety, great. then have Jewish anxiety, have Torah anxiety over like, am I doing the mitzvah in the best way? Am I studying Torah to the best of my ability? In other words, push yourself, huh? No. He's saying no. There's action. You need to take action. It's not a question. Worry? Who says to worry? If something happens and you need to respond, great or not great, but like, yes, that's what needs to happen. But what about the emotional layer of worry? Worry is not the same thing. Worry is an additional layer. So he says, yes, there is a place to worry. Where? Am I doing the mitzvah correctly? Am I studying enough Torah? Am I understanding it the way I should understand? What type of worry? The distance of their soul from the light of the infinite, may he be blessed. In other words, I'm worried about that maybe my soul is not as connected as it should be. Maybe I'm a little too far from the Eibusher, from Hashem. And what is the answer to that worry? That which the verse tells you, this was my consolation, my poverty, that your words of Torah gave me life. And when you're feeling distant or you're worried that you might be a little too distant, study some Torah. And that will bring you close again. So what's the point of all this? First of all, I said before when we started this letter, print this letter, cut out this letter. Well, it's already printed here, whatever. Print this letter, cut out this letter, post it, post this on your status and social, whatever you want to do. Take an excerpt, live with it. I cannot tell you how life-changing this advice can be. It is unbelievable. To review quickly the main points that he says. He says, number one, right? If we were to go over the main points, he would say, number one, the worry and anxiety, it's not going to help anything. Sugasan. Worry and anxiety is not going to help. In fact, before the soldiers went out to war, they were told, don't worry, don't be anxious. They were told that. So then what do? So he says, look, all your emotions, your emotional disposition, it's all coming from the mind, right? So if you can sever that connection or redirect your mind, so then it's not fueling your heart anymore. So then you're golden. You're golden because you're not stuck in that space of mental, you're not in that mental space, which is creating the emotional space. So then what do? He says, good. Your thought, speech, and action are always a human is always in control over the thought, speech, and action. And that means that you can choose and you can control what you're thinking about, what you're speaking about, what you're doing at any given moment. So think about something else. Speech, don't speak about this. And action, do something positive. Do something positive, do something helpful, do something that's going to get you into a different space. What about dealing with this? You'll figure it out. You'll deal with it. Or you'll channel your worry away from the stuff that Hashem's going to take care of anyway into stuff that you need to work on, i.e. your connection with Hashem. And then he does the kicker. The kicker is, and this is why I read this letter, not only because we should probably read it like once a month, we should, but aside from that, no, literally, like this is a letter to live with, to teach our children about, to share with, friends and family. This is a letter to live with. But the reason why I cited this letter today is that line that I pointed out, that the disposition that we have below triggers the disposition above. And literally being in a space of tightness, being in a space of worry and anxiety below triggers the same type of response above. And that's the type of energy that flows to us, as opposed to being in a joyous and expansive modality below, triggers a joyous and expansive flow from above. And so that literally what a person receives from on high is based on and commensurate with his or her disposition or space below, which again upends the entire structure, the entire system that we thought we knew how it worked. We always thought that the way the spiritual systems work is that it flows from above to below, that God is pulling the strings, right? There's a mechanism, there's a whole thing, and we are on the receiving end. We're on the final end of the production line, right? Spits out what we get, and that's determined from above what we get. And here we have this radical statement. The Maggid Mizrich was quoted, right? Remember, the Tzemach Tzedek quoted his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, who quoted his teacher, the Maggid Mizrich. Hashem. There's another verse that the Maggid or the Baal Shem Tov also expounds upon. Same idea. Hashem tzilcha. God is your shadow. We're not God's shadow. God is our shadow. What does that mean? The way we move, God moves. Again, it's a radical statement to say that heaven moves according to the beat of our drum, as opposed to the opposite. That's exactly what Hasidus suggests. That's exactly what the mystics suggest. That yes, we have the power to control what heavens shower upon us, and it's not dissimilar to the water cycle, right? If we have toxic water below on Earth and that evaporates, well, then guess what's going to come down? Acid rain or whatever it's called, right? So that's what's going to come down. What goes up comes down, and it's in a very similar way. We could think that everything is flowing one direction, from above to below, from God to us. And again, we are merely passive recipients. We're told to do mitzvahs, we do mitzvahs, and then God gives, but not based on what we do, but Chassidus points out, Kabbalah points out that no, it works the other way around. Well, I mean, it works both ways, but it also works the other way around, which means what we do triggers above and that comes down. But not only what we do, what we say, what we think, how we feel. As he says, the disposition, the mood, our emotion, our emotional state affects the divine emotional state, as it were, if we could use that term, the divine emotional state, and that directly influences the measure, the type, the frequency, the temperature, as it were, of the blessings, or whatever, let's just call them blessings, that which comes from above to below. Which means, and we find that the Rebbe, our Rebbe, quoted this so many times in letters to people. You want more blessings in your life? Change your attitude, change your mood. The more positive you know, when it's like also like when applying for a job, right? If you're in a more joyous state, it just creates more positivity all around. People are more likely to want to be around the people that are more positive. That's just the way kind of human energy, the law of attraction, whatever you want to call it, works. And this is like what I would say the Kabbalistic law of attraction, which is that the more positive, a little bit left, the more positive we are below, the more open and positive we are below, the more open and positive it is above for us. All of this relates to our text, which speaks about the idea that everything that we do below triggers a response from above. We're not going to read this inside today. We're going to read it inside next week, but it is absolutely magnificent. This idea that when we recognize the truth of reality, when we recognize that God is in control, and when we utilize the things around us with that, displaying that awareness. In other words, if we eat, and when we eat, we're aware of the fact that this is coming from Hashem, coming from God, and the food is here for a purpose, and we utilize the energy of the food for its intended purpose, then what that does is it's not just that we are in a good space, but we connect cosmically. We connect physical reality. We plug it back into its spiritual source. In other words, the actions that you and I take, and it might be the same bagel that we're eating, but the consciousness, the awareness that we have while eating the bagel can literally shape the connections that are made or not made between heaven and earth. What we do matters. I mean, we know about things like the butterfly effect, that everything, a small butterfly flaps its wings in this part of the world, it can create a tsunami in another part of the world. We know the law of conservation of matter, that nothing is ever created or destroyed, right? That the things that are affect everything else and never disappear. And so our actions, but more than our actions, the things that we say, the things that we think, the way we feel has a very real and direct impact. And so a lot of things to think about. And none of this is by way of Jewish guilt, to say that what you do affects the whole entire world and the cosmic reality. So be very careful. This is not a negative message. This is a positive message. It's a message of empowerment. It's a message of saying that recognize that you and I are not puny creatures, as science perhaps would tell us, tiny mistakes, cosmic, the end product of a big bang that could or could not have happened, some sort of cosmic accident that then, genetics that created us here on Earth, or that spawned us on Earth. And therefore what we do doesn't really matter, because we didn't even really need to be here. Judaism says, no, we needed to be here. We are meant to be here. And everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we think, every way we feel makes a difference. So with that in mind, we are not powerless. We are powerful and powerful beyond measure. What we do matters, and we can make an impact, not just on ourselves, but on those around us and on the world. And so when we are feeling in a negative mood, when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling worried, let's fight the good fight internally to get ourselves to a positive space, to try to get ourselves to a more positive space. And by doing so, we indeed, thank you very much. Oh, okay. And by doing so, let us indeed make it rain from above with positivity and goodness and kindness and all of the blessings. Whatever we want, we have to mirror that below. We have to generate what we want above. We want open blessings. We want happy blessings. We want positive blessings. We want revealed blessings. Great. Let's live that inside of ourselves. When we're in that space, that triggers the same from above. Thank you very much for joining me this morning for Kabbalah Café. Hope you enjoyed it. This is, again, a letter literally to live with. Dr. Maxey, jump in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I had a question about the part with the grandson and was
Yes.
quoting the Maggid about never a sad song. So I presume that his grandfather was saying, don't pray Maariv with a sad tune, but that ultimately, once the Alter Rebbe passed, that the grandson did in fact mourn and sit Shiva, etc.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's a very
okay. I mean, because you're not
Yes.
saying put on a happy face when. Okay.
Thank you for pointing that out. Excellent point. In other words, what I think the Alter Rebbe was telling his grandson is that if you're praying for a miracle, if you're praying for health, if you're praying for, then be the prayer that you want. Be the blessing that you want to generate. So you want a blessing of goodness, kindness, mercy, compassion, etc. So be in that space, be in that disposition. Yes, somebody, God forbid, passes away. Yes, there's mourning, there's shiva, there's sadness, there's crying, there's Torah prescribed and even mandated mourning. But when we're asking for a blessing, when we're praying for something, and we're praying for a positive blessing from above, then we have to be open and positive about that. But yeah, I think that's the big idea. Great to see you. Good to see you.
On the side.
Oh, nice.
From what you're saying is like.
This is
Thanksgiving
great.
will be good, but why does God pull out from under you irregardless of your thoughts?
So it's a good question. What Eva's asking is, well, what happens if sometimes we are positive and we are hopeful and we are prayerful, etc., and it doesn't work out? And so it sounds like God maybe is not listening. So it doesn't always work. Okay. So that gets into the idea that ultimately, we do our best, but ultimately we don't. And even if it's reflected above naturally, we don't control all the outcomes. We can generate a spirit of whatever it is, but we don't necessarily control the outcome. I mean, at the end of the day, that Tzemach Tzedek's Mechutin, he passed away, as we saw in the first letter. Right? He did pass away, but he was telling him that your job is not to worry about that. Your job is to be positive because that's going to bring the blessings, right? That but everyone at the end of the day passes away. And for him, he was trying to, I think, alleviate his suffering. Maybe not alleviate the pain, but alleviate the suffering. Because pain and suffering are not always the same thing. The pain is the objective pain. The suffering is the coupling of the anxiety, the worry, the pain, like that sort of, like those other pieces of it. I think he was trying to kind of minimize that. But we do believe that we're better poised to receive the blessings when we are in a more positive and open space. Does that guarantee that the exact thing that we're asking for will always be answered, and that our loved ones will never that doesn't always mean that, we don't control all the outcomes, but we do go, there's a long way that we go into determining certainly how we go through the challenges, but also how the blessings come down. All right, a lot to think about. Hey, Matt, good to see you. I was going to think, my pleasure. I had so many thoughts and things that we've talked about many times before about because Matt, I always think about you and like technology and like gaming and that sort of thing, and like how, now it's user generated worlds and how, it's all about the user creating the experience, user driven experience, as opposed to top down. It's like even, UX, like user experience stuff. Like, okay, I want my dashboard to look customized. I want it to look like I look, it's reflected in your image as opposed to someone dictating the way things are going to work. God also says, tell me how you want this to look. Right? God says, you create the experience. The way you show up will create a user experience around your disposition. You're happy? Great. Right? You want yellow? Great. You want red or black? Sure. Whatever you decide your color. Like phone has a light mode and a dark mode. It used to be the phone was just a phone. Now you can control a light mode, a dark mode, dynamic wallpapers, whatever. You get to customize your experience. But know that you and we have that power in our hands. Like we're doing the customization. It's a powerful tool that we have. So Kabbalah really opens that awareness for us that like we're not just passive recipients, we're active co-creators almost in this dynamic, which makes our mood not just our mood, but like a larger, exactly, a larger piece. Merle, it's great to see you. You feeling good? Baruch Hashem. Great to see you. Shavua Tov. Shavua Tov, everyone. Dr. Maxey, great to see you. Deborah, Matt, Shoshi, Jackie, Yaakov, David, Jeff, and Diane, Frank, Lisa. All right, we'll see you guys soon. Stay tuned for some very special announcements of stuff. I actually sent out an email this morning. I scheduled an email this morning, so it probably went out. Tribute on the 29th. We have upcoming events that are going to be spectacular, classes and courses. So stay tuned for more fun and excitement. All right, see you soon. Take care.